Hello. How's everyone doing? Thanks for making it out. It's such a beautiful day. I would be outside. It's not too late. You can bail. So my talk is going to be kind of a kaleidoscopic overview of my thoughts around why I think it's really important for the world to have more art, and some ideas for how I think we can go about creating several orders of magnitude more art, and also how to fund all of that art that I think ought to be made. Oh, that's my son. Hi, Remy. So I'm the founder and CEO and designer of Kaleidoscope. My co-founder, Ruben's right there. He holding my boy. He actually makes all the pretty pictures I draw do things. So thank you, Ruben. And at Kaleidoscope, what we are is an online market for the XR industry. We bring together artists and industry leaders to develop, fund, and distribute virtual reality, augmented reality projects. I come from a family of artists. That's my grandfather there. He was a violinist and had a big band in Buffalo, New York. And that's my mom, dressed as a space pirate. She's a jazz singer. This is a really funny video shoot from the 70s. She was actually pregnant with me there. That's my uncle, Paul, with the ruffly shirt. That's my grandmother. Actually, that's not my grandmother. That's Diana Durbin. My grandmother was a body double for her. That's Grandma right there. And this is my great-grandfather, who was a vaudevillian acrobat. He performed with a lot of the greats, like the Marx Brothers and Bob Hope and Blackstone the Magician. And growing up, I was surrounded by art, thinking that it was a normal thing. You know, everyone in my family was creative, either professionally or privately. So I grew up with a real appreciation for art and a deep understanding of the joy that it can bring into your life and the magic. This is my aunt. She was probably the most talented and creative person I ever met, but she was hopeless when it came to anything that had to do with money. It was absolutely impossible for her to figure out how to make money with her amazing talents. So she'd just do it for the family. She'd do these crazy performances, these crazy art projects that we just get to be graced with at holidays. And my perspective on all of this changed as I got older, and I realized how difficult it was to be an artist, not just the magic of it and the joy of it, but the difficulty. Because, again, it's almost impossible to make a living as an artist. So I've often thought about, why is it so damn difficult to be an artist? Why is it so hard to get money for your projects? Is this some natural state? Is this the only way that it has to be, or is there some alternative? And as I became an artist myself, as a filmmaker, I started to form ideas around that the real problem was in funding. The real problem is in how difficult and challenging it is to raise that capital, and how confusing and time-consuming and complex it is. If you're familiar at all with raising money, you understand that complexity. It's this bizarre patchwork of grants, tax incentives, licensing deals, pre-sale agreements, private investment, and each of those is a different skill set to unlock that funding. It's also super slow. When we raised money for one of our bigger projects, Spheres, it was over $1 million, and it took us 14 months. And that's not particularly bad. I mean, I have a project that has been on the back burner, slowly being developed for like 5 years. And again, this is not unusual at all. It's a very, very slow process. And it's almost always hard. Just because you've done one project that has been successful, even if you have a track record of success, even if you have a successful name, it's almost always hard. I have been fortunate enough to be friends with some really well-regarded artists that are, most of us look at and think, oh my God, they've got it all figured out. But they have tons of projects that they're never, ever able to get off the ground. And Orson Welles said it best. It's my favorite quote from him. I've wasted the greater part of my life looking for money. It's about 2% movie making and 98% hustle. And that equation really has stuck in my mind since I first heard it as a teenager. That seems fucked. That seems totally fucked, that you should spend that much energy on something outside of your core skills, which is, making art. And the bigger and more complex the projects get, the more this ratio looks like this. You know, if you're a novelist, you can kind of produce your work on your own, but if you're a filmmaker, if you are making video games, if you're making virtual reality or augmented reality projects, those are deeply collaborative endeavors that almost always take a lot of money, and if it takes a lot of money, it's gonna be really hard. So again, for the last 25 years, I've been thinking about this problem. Is there a better way? Can we invent a new system for financing projects that's simple, scalable, and artist-friendly? So that was one question that I've been hanging on to for a while, and we're going to return to that. But I'm going to talk about this little kid first, Remy. I became a dad a year ago as of Saturday. Remy will be 1 year old on Saturday. And when you have a kid, if you have one, it changes your perspective. And it makes you think about the future more and what kind of future you want your kid to grow up in. So that was one big influence that happened. And then I read these 3 books. I don't know how many of you have read Yuval Noah Harari's books, but they've been hugely influential on me over the last, I guess, 3 years is when I first read A Brief History of Humankind. And it's put me in this other mindset of having a better idea of where humanity sits in the overall cosmic scale of things and where we're headed, and has made me think about, particularly his last book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, about a lot of the challenges we face. So humanity faces 3 extinction-level existential threats right now: environmental collapse, nuclear war, and radical new technologies like AI and bioengineering. And any of these things are very, very likely to kill all of us. And again, when you're a dad, you start to think about these things. If you're looking at how to solve any of these problems, it requires global cooperation at an unprecedented scale and speed. Something that we've never done before, something that I'm not sure we can do, at least with how things are structured right now. And this gets to why we're not up to the job, which is culture. Our civilization is really hardwired for the limiting concerns of nationalism and tribalism. And when we think about anything that requires massive global cooperation, we don't know how to do that. We don't have a history of that. Humans are one of the only organizations that can restructure how we operate and how we communicate beyond people that we know personally. And that's been our super skill up to now. It's why we've been able to move from somewhere in the middle of the food chain as a not particularly remarkable ape to the top. It's this one ability to create myths and to change how we structure ourselves organizationally that's allowed us to leapfrog ahead of so many other species. I think about it like an operating system. I think culture is kind of like an operating system. It's how we program our interactions with each other and the planet. So if we're thinking about how to face any of these giant existential threats, we really need to shift our culture. We need to change our culture. That's, I think, whatever kind of solution we could come up with is very much related to the answer to that problem. We have to expand our identity beyond the local towards the global, and encourage loyalty not just to our local tribe, whatever that looks like, to all of humankind and beyond humankind. We need to expand the circle of compassion beyond just humans, too, to everything that's on planet Earth. So then how do we shift culture? If that's the solution, if the solution is somewhere in shifting culture, how do we do that? The more I think about it, the more I think art holds some of that answer. I think art shifts culture. I think there's a lot of ways that culture shifts, but I think art is one of the most effective and beneficial ways of shifting culture towards something positive, because it shows us who we are, or who we might become. It holds up a mirror to us, and I think that self-reflection is how we shift culture in a positive direction, not a negative one. Art helps us identify with one another and expand our notion of we from the local to the global. So I believe we need more art. I think we need 1,000 times more art in order to face the challenges of the 21st century and to reprogram our culture. The question then becomes, how do we create 1,000 times more art? How is this going to be possible? How's this feasible? What does this mean? First, I think we need to expand the definition of art. This is the easy part. It's a conceptual framework that gets us at least somewhat of the way. Duchamp is art. This is a thing that, a famous piece that Duchamp made in 1917 called The Fountain, and it was a watershed moment in art history where Duchamp was saying anything that an artist identifies as art can be art. If I'm signing it and putting it in the context of a museum, it becomes art because it's embedding a statement and an ideology, and I'm expressing something through it. So art becomes something that an artist makes and identifies as art. So this is art. But I think Star Wars could also be art. I don't think just because something's in a museum, in the normal context that we think about art, that's the only way that a cultural artifact can be considered art. So art is anything made by an artist, and an artist is anyone who reveals emotional truths about life. This is my definition of art. It's a hard thing to nail down. If you've got a better one, let me know. But I think this gets us somewhat towards the answer of what art is. So art can be big-budget superhero movies. I saw Black Panther, and I was like, that is fucking a piece of art. I love Black Panther. It moved me in so many ways. Indie video games can be art. Immersive experiences, graffiti, fashion design, Broadway musical, dance, animated GIFs, Native American basket weaving, reality TV shows, and any other imaginable expression, medium of expression can be art. So I think we need to expand the definition of art to create more art and have people who are creating these cultural artifacts think of themselves as artists. So that's the easy part. The two other parts are not as easy. I think the second way that we create an exponential growth in creation and funding for art is we need to network the industry. If you think about the way the art and entertainment industry is today, it's highly fragmented, super siloed, and it's mostly offline. It's a very, very inefficient market. It requires us to fly across the world to beautiful events like this to meet people face to face. I think that these events will always be important. But most of the business is done offline. It's a very relationship-based business, which is fantastic, but is also very inefficient. And this brings us to Kaleidoscope for the first time. This is what we've been working on, and we have a very basic version of today, which is trying to bring the industry online with a networked marketplace. Again, I think the physical meat space that we are in right now is important. It'll always be important, but I think we can make the industry work much more efficiently at allocating resources, and we can make the time scale and the complexity, again, those two big problems with fundraising, complexity, it's very slow, and it's always hard. I think complexity and speed can be significantly impacted by rationalizing it with an online marketplace. And I think XR is where you should start, because it's a new industry, and new industries are open to new ways of business. So I think if we're going to try to change any of this stuff, I think starting with XR is the right starting point. It gives us a crack and a way in to rewrite the rules. So at Sundance this year, we launched the first version of our online market, and it's done pretty well, even though it's incredibly basic right now, almost like embarrassingly so. It's a big part of the startup ethos is to launch before you feel you're ready, and that's definitely true with us. But even so, the projects on our platform have raised a little bit more than $27 million. We have almost 500 projects on the platform and getting up there towards 2,000 members. These are some of the projects that have come through Kaleidoscope. We executive produced Spheres with Darren Aronofsky and Atlas V. We do almost everything with Atlas V because they're fantastic. Terminal 3, brilliant augmented reality documentary experience. Vestige, another beautiful documentary piece that premiered at Tribeca. Battlescar is probably my favorite project. I'm biased, because we EP'd it, but I think it's the best thing in VR. Absolutely love it, and very proud of the fact that it came through Kaleidoscope. And we're just getting started. we're going to be launching a new version of Kaleidoscope at Venice in a couple of months. That's going to be filled with a lot of powerful new tools for artists and industry to connect. Because that's really what we view the version of what Kaleidoscope is today, is facilitating that connection between artists and industry, and helping artists identify who are the right people at the right companies to talk to about my project. And on the industry side, helping them sift through all of the projects and find that signal in the noise to select and engage with the projects that really match their interests and their business requirements. The final leg of this stool is we need more money. So the first one, expand the definition. The second one, make what we have already work more efficiently. And the third one is we need more money. We just need more money. Because the industry itself has money, even the XR industry, right? Like XR is super small. And even though Kaleidoscope is a small part of that small industry, the fact that the artists on our platform have collectively raised a pretty significant amount is good. But even if it's hyper efficient at allocating those resources, there's still not enough for the orders of magnitude increase that I think we need in art production. So if you look at how do you get to more money flowing into art, I think you have to start thinking about art and entertainment as an investment. And why you don't see more private investors putting money into art and entertainment projects the same way you do with startups. And the truth is that right now, the way the industry works is it's a bad investment. It's a shitty investment to put money into art and entertainment projects from a financial perspective. There's limited access. So if you're a private investor or somebody that's outside of the industry, you're not going to have access to top art and entertainment projects. And those are the ones that generate most of the returns. It's expensive. If you're somebody that wants to put money into a film, for instance, and there are a lot of private investors that do that, and they're doing it mostly for emotional reasons, it costs a lot of money to even put that money in because of legal fees. There's no standardized deal term, so you're going to be spending somewhere between $5,000 and $50,000 on just setting up the legal agreements to put money into a project in the first place, which is insane. And the last reason that I don't think we see more private investment is because there's no transparency. Hollywood in particular is notorious for unethical accounting practices where they offset losses of certain projects with the gains of others, but the net of that is investors don't see money. And that lack of transparency and lack of trust is a huge signaling factor to not put money into art and entertainment projects. And the irony of all of this is that art and entertainment can actually be a really good investment. There's big returns to be had. If you look at the S&P 500, the average return on investment for the last 100 years is 9.8%. Now, if you look at the feature films that made over, or not made, but had a budget of over $50 million in the last 10 years, their returns were 276%. So actually, a lot of money was generated at that top end of production. And this isn't cherry picking. This is just any film that was produced that had a budget of over $50 million. The average returns were 276%. And that's why you see big studios tending towards mega budget films, because the likelihood that you're going to get a breakout success that does 10x is low, but the likelihood that you're going to get 2x is actually pretty high. And the other factor that I think investing in art and entertainment is a good investment is that it's a giant market. The art and entertainment industry globally is well over $1 trillion. And this is where we start talking about the future of Kaleidoscope. What we're trying to do now is have these types of conversations, both to get feedback as well as to refine our own thinking about how we can build something that allows private investors to put money into movies, video games, XR projects, and how we can build a new model for fundraising. And these are some of the design considerations based on all of this research and thought that we think this new model ought to have. We think we need to make it open. I think we need to make the bar for entry incredibly low and incredibly simple for anyone to put money into art and entertainment projects. And this again gets back to the fact that there's no standardization and the fact that legally, for most investment classes, you have to be an accredited investor, which means you have over $250,000 of income every year or over $1 million of liquid assets. and that excludes a lot of people. So I think we need to change that and make it very open and very easy. Next, I think we need to make it rewarding, both emotionally and financially. Right now, I think the art and entertainment industry does a fine job of rewarding people emotionally, because that's pretty much the only thing they can do for indie projects that investors have access to, is emotionally give them the feels. But financially, we need to do a much better job of making it rewarding. And finally, I think we need to make it trusted. We need to standardize deal terms. We need to make accounting that's transparent and fully auditable. So you have confidence when you invest in a project that if it makes money, you're going to get a piece of that. So are there any models already that do this? I don't think so, but I think there's pieces we can grab. Crowdfunding helps in a lot of ways, and it answers a lot of those questions around making it open and making it emotionally rewarding. The issue with crowdfunding is that there's just not enough money there. If you look at the average successful campaign on Kickstarter, movies just raised $13,000. Video games, $54,000. XR projects, $7,000. And as we know, that's a fine amount of money if you're doing a little prototype or a little demo and it's just you and some friends. But it's far, far below the average amount required for professional productions. The professional average for financially successful films is $75 million. So you can see that shortfall and that delta between what crowdfunding can reliably raise and what professional projects require is massive. How about thinking of art and entertainment investing like a traditional equity investment? Can we scale that up? Can we make that work? And I think there's a lot to learn there, but the big issue that I see is that with how you structure investments into technology companies or any kind of company, it leaves out a hugely important thing, which is cultural impact. Shares don't have any mechanism for valuing cultural impact, and we know that art and entertainment, that's what's special about it, is that a good project can not only generate revenue, but it also, and sometimes more importantly, can generate cultural impact. But there's no mechanism right now for valuing that, especially with shares. This had us thinking about the fine art market. What does the fine art market have to say about making art and entertainment an investment asset? It has a lot to like. It does value cultural impact. It's the only model out there, in fact, that values cultural impact. If you think about how much does a painting cost when you sell it at a market, that number is what the group of people that are interested in it collectively think its cultural impact is. That dollar figure is actually compressing all of those opinions into one number, and that number is a representation of how much cultural impact we think this project has today or how much it will have in the future. So that's, I think, a really interesting thing. Okay, we have some mechanism that's proven for putting dollar bills and assigning them to how much cultural impact a project has. The problem is, it doesn't work for Star Wars, right? Again, and that's because of this mental framework. When you think about a project like Star Wars, like the fine art market, how does that even work? How would you make Star Wars something that you could sell at auction at Sotheby's? Those two models are very, very separate, but I don't think they need to be. What if it did work for Star Wars? What if we took what works in the art market, which values cultural impact, and what if we blended it with what works in the entertainment industry, which values revenue? What if we made some hybrid model that could take the best of both of those? And this is where we get towards something that I feel like is an answer, and that we've been calling cultural crowdfunding. And this is this idea that what if we allowed creators to raise money for new work by selling limited edition versions of their project directly to fans, collectors, and investors? What if we could take the thing that works in the fine art market, which is scarcity? That's the mechanism by which you can have a market assign a dollar amount to cultural impact. What if we could scale that scarcity up from 1, which you have in a painting or a sculpture, or perhaps 10 in a limited edition run of prints, and scale it up to potentially millions? And I think we could do this starting with something very simple, like a legal fiction. That works already in the art market. When you sell a piece of art, you sell it with a certificate of authenticity, which is just a piece of paper. And then you have one step up from that, which is digital rights management, which is pretty robust and proven. And then one step up from that is blockchain, which is pretty much designed for this type of thing where you create scarcity with digital assets, which all art is pretty much going to be now. And I think the way I would model it is allowing investors to get emotional equity with things like recognition, so credits, bragging rights, you get to attend maybe the premiere, you get early access, so you can see it before the public, and then you get special features that only you get as an owner of one of these limited editions. But then we bundle it with financial equity, so getting things like revenue share, points on the back end, having hooks in it so that you can participate in future iterations of that IP, so right of first refusal. And then, maybe most importantly, the right to resell at an appreciated value, which again is very much cribbing from the fine art market. And I think this new model would work for artists in the following ways. I think it would capture the full value that artists create. Again, right now, artists are only being valued on how much revenue a project makes and not how much cultural impact, especially if you're not in the fine art market. If you're making movies or video games, you don't get to capture the full value you're creating. But I think this new model would allow you to do that. And it puts artists in the driver's seat. There's so much inefficiency and middlemen that a model like this would cut out. And cutting all that inefficiency out and having it be a more direct relationship between the artist and fans, collectors, investors would give so much more control and power to artists. And finally, I think we could structure this as an investment asset that would be open to anyone. One of the magical things about art is that it's highly unregulated. So if you were to scale up the fine art market, you could make an investment asset that anyone could buy. Anybody can buy a painting. You can invest your entire life savings into a painting, and there's no rule that says you can't. But that's not the case with other types of investment assets, which have a lot of restrictions on who can put money into it. So that's what we're doing. We're first building out an online network, which is what we're doing today, and we'd love for you to join us. If you go to kaleidoscope.fund, you can apply for membership. It's pretty easy. As long as you're a part of the industry and doing work of substance, we'd love to have you. And then tomorrow, what we're doing is trying to allow people to put money directly into projects and solve a lot of the problems we talked about. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your attentive energy, and I look forward to talking to all 5 of you afterwards.